So good afternoon, everybody. You're welcome to the June edition of the BIM Africa BIM Talk. Today we will be having our speaker, Architect Hassan. He will be introducing himself. You can see that it's online, and would want to request that everybody should mute their microphones so that we can disable background noise while he's presenting. After his session, there will be a question and answer, and then we can learn how to mute our mics and ask our questions. So, Architect Hassan, we can go on now. Thank you. Your microphone is muted. We can't hear you.
Okay, you
Yes.
can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Hassan, and I'm excited to be with you all today. Excuse me. I'm an architect and co-founder at Chrono Studios. I'm also a researcher at Texas A&M University, and I think I have one of my colleagues here. Howdy, I can see you. I'm excited, and I'll be presenting to you BIM plus virtual reality, game design for human building interaction. And most of the keywords will be, hearing about BIM, AR, VR education, game, human building interaction. So without further ado, let's proceed. So here's a little bit about my background. I might disable my video just to be sure that everyone can get the best out of the presentation. So I might come back on video when it's time to answer questions. So here's a little bit about my background. I've had several years of experience in architectural design and construction. Yeah, mostly with BIM and 3D rendering, 3D visualizations, high-end 3D renderings for uh, private and corporate clients. I have some, quite some, I think about 3 years of experience with e-commerce in the design and construction industry. And I'm also an avid gamer. I play a lot of games and a lot of role-playing games. And I've had experience developing some, based on lighting and texturing, user experience and user interaction design, and play testing and mechanics, just to see how people respond to how games work and how to get the best out of it. So here we go. The common concepts behind gaming is mostly, if people get to hear, um, when someone says gaming, what typically comes to people's minds is realistic role-playing games. It could be as high-handed as that, or it could be as simple as board games. And there are some things that are really common about gaming, and one of them is the objective, which is to either learn something or to win something. And it usually has increasing difficulty. So to speak, a lot of us are used to, like, the Marios, the brick games, and there is always like this level of difficulty, like, level 1, level 2, that gets more difficult as you proceed. And also there's always a reward for completion. It could be some bonus points, you might be releasing some perks, it might be giving you some coins or some money or something like that. And also another objective is that they want you to play it again. So even after completing it, it should be interesting enough for you to want to play it again. And also another objective would be being able to collaborate with friends. So for example, you're able to play with your friends, either against your friends or together with your friends. These are common concepts behind gaming that cuts across almost all industries. So a quick disclaimer: this is not a software tutorial or class, so I'm not going to be telling you guys about how to move one object from one point to another, but I'm going to be sharing a lot of the terminologies that will help you to get started with BIM and VR. I'm going to highlight a little bit on best modeling practices for content so that you can have some very good performance. And also locomotion and interaction design techniques. So, talking about what controller is my preference. And also I'll be mentioning some industry recommended industry software and workflow. And I might share some, ideas about beginner techniques and one secret tip about, how to develop virtual reality with minimum coding, because, people might tell you, you don't have to learn how to code, but I can categorically tell you firsthand that, coding is something you have to learn and you have to be interested in. So let's roll. A lot of the acronyms that we probably already know, but I will also further highlight on Video Information Modeling, BIM, VR, which is virtual reality. So if you hear me saying VR, that's practically what I'm referring to. AR, not much in this presentation, but might be user experience, UX, which is a major factor in game design. User interface, which I might, just brush over, but maybe in a later webinar, we can have a very detailed conversation about UI. Level of detail, LOD, level of detail of development. And this is important to BIM and also game performance. And BIM level 3, which encompasses a deeper collaboration between stakeholders through a model that is stored in a central repository. And Unity. Unity is a software, is a proprietary game development software that is responsible for more than 65% of VR games or AR games across the globe. So let's have a quick overview. In architectural practice, basically, complex drawings in design practice are usually like really complicated to go through. If you have like a tower drawing with tons of visualizations and tons of layers and tons of drawings, it could get really complicated for people to understand, and especially for people who are not architects or in the discipline, it could become a very huge challenge for them to navigate through it. That's presently how a lot of architectural practices have been run. It's a ton of drawings and 2D projections. You're cutting the section in a specific way that you want it to be viewed, and things like that. And for design education in universities and schools, learning is mostly trial and error. The professor says, hey, go find out, what this is about. Go learn about this building. Go learn about this precedent. And a lot of the materials are outdated. And even with COVID-19 today, it's become more difficult, with online classes. I had this senior colleague of mine who's a professor in Ekoma University AAU, and she said it was like it's getting really hard to get students to understand architecture with online classes. And I also actually experienced that firsthand because I was a professor in a design studio of about 16 students, and it was very difficult, to migrate to the online session. But there are opportunities in all of this for us. So implementation in practice is growing. 67% of firms, of the big firms, are saying that they're adopting virtual reality. Just 27% of the mid-sized firms are, making provisions for this penetration into their firm culture. But in design education, it's very low. It's very low because for some reason, universities, research centers are really slow in adopting some of these technologies much less in a much lesser speed than the industry usually does. And this is quite some difficulty, other than the fact that some of these devices may be expensive and might be readily purchased by practicing firms. There's a huge gap between the adoption in industry and the adoption in technology. So let's have a very quick overview of game design for human building interaction. I'm going to be sharing some basic concepts about what makes this work, how the best practices that makes it work, the things that you should be looking out for if you are a game designer, or if you're a game tester, or you're actually testing or running a game for architecture that was designed by somebody else, there are a couple of factors that you need to have at the back of your mind. And so I'm going to split this into two basically. And the bottom part, which is a user experience, is how well is the experience for the user? How well does the user perceive the space? How well, how much do they feel in the spaces that they're exploring or in the environments that you've designed for them to explore? And this can be broken down much further into, how photorealistic is this? Do they feel like it's real? Does it give them much more presence? Like, oh yeah, I feel like I am in this space. And that's where spatial awareness comes in. Can they interact with these spaces like on a human scale, one-on-one? Am I feeling like the size of the door is the size of my body in the VR? This level of immersion is very important. If immersion is broken, that experience is going to be broken. And also in terms of performance, how can people interact with this object or data that is inside of it? If they cannot interact with it properly, if that interaction experience is broken, then they don't want to come back to the game. And if their ability to complete tasks are hampered by either the level of difficulty, like it's so hard to get around, or it's so hard to lift this object, it's so hard to move things, the experience is broken, and they don't want to come back. And overall, once the experience is broken, it leads to like the engagement is broken. So, and ultimately, when we're talking about engagement, the outcome that we want to have is that people are able to either design in these VR games or they're able to learn, some kind of outcomes in this VR game. So the moment the experience is broken, that these outcomes cannot be achieved. So this experience will ultimately lead to how we're going to have the outcome, no matter how detailed the outcome a VR game or BIM VR game designer says they want to have. If their inability to develop or create a very good user experience is determined, is broken, there is not going to be maximum engagement. So VR actually has a lot of immersion because users are typically disconnected from the environment in which their physical body is, which makes it really good for engagement and outcomes and delivery outcomes. But AR on the other side has less immersion in the sense that so for example, if you're designing an AR game, with BIM, for example, your user still has other distractions. They have their emails coming in, they have chat notifications coming in, they have other people talking to them, and this usually breaks engagement and can actually reduce how much design outcome or educational outcome your game is going to have. So these are two major spectrum, and I am going to be talking more about the VR part of things. And so the game must be engaging. You must have an outcome or reward. There has to be a reward for who is playing it. Like, oh yeah, I finished this, so I'm going to be certified in that, or I finished this, so now I understand this better. And it must not be too challenging. So if it becomes too challenging, people are going to abandon the game. And if it's too simple, they just complete it and they don't come back. So there are very tricky parts to it. So let's quickly look at a demo video for VR BIM viewer. And I must quickly say that for people who are in this webinar on their mobile phones, they might experience a little bit lag or performance for some reason. Zoom is not optimized for video streaming while sharing, but you should still have a very beautiful experience. For people on the PC, I think you should have quite a easy viewing experience. So this is a very short video, and it's basically just showing how people can use a controller to interact with object and data from inside a BIM model. For example, you can see, the kind of descriptions on the items, the categories they fall into. You're in control of the palette, which you're using to view. Your controller is basically doing most of the work. And in this example, the user is mostly just standing in a spot. So we're going to move on to the next slide now. So here are typically common controllers for virtual reality. And the thing about controllers is that they play a huge role in gaming. So if anyone here in this session plays games, they will know that if you're using a keyboard and a mouse, and you're using a gamepad controller, you usually will have a different experience if you're playing a computer game. And these actually, these different types of controllers actually require different game design techniques. Popular ones, like this one on the left, is the Oculus Quest controller. And the one on the right is the HTC Vive controller, which is my preference. I prefer the one on the right because it provides more intuitive controls. It makes it easy to navigate, and for a lot of people, especially a lot of entry-level gamers, they will find it more intuitive to learn. It has a lesser learning curve, much more than the Oculus Quest. I mean, again, this is my preference. I mean, these are things that I've studied and discovered, and some people might have a different opinion based on what they're used to. Just the same way some people prefer keyboard and mouse controllers in gaming, and some people prefer a console controller for gaming. So these are basically the most common, and my preference is for the one on the right, which is the HTC Vive controller, because it provides a much lesser learning curve for entry-level gamers. So why do we design for sustainable interaction with virtual models? Why is it important for us to be able to be sure that with all the data that we have in our building information model, we can get people to interact with it in a very good way. So the objective for our design basically is that we want to improve stakeholder engagement. We want our clients to be able to step into our model and not just flip through thousands of drawings or wait until the building is coming up on site before they can have an idea of what we're designing. So we want our clients, we want the engineers, we want the facility managers, we want the institution, we want the authorities, we want the government to be able to step into our designs and feel and interact with all of this. So our objective is to improve stakeholder engagement as architects. And also as design education specialists, we want to improve learning outcomes. We want students to be able to learn. We want professors to be able to deliver content in a much more engaging way. And the roadblocks to achieving these objectives is basically just like mostly one thing. It's not even computer performance. It's not even price of gadgets. It's not even willingness for adoption. It is poor execution. And poor execution can actually lead to people disengaging with your content. Poor execution can make people just abandon the game and say, I never want to do that, or because I feel sick, or I feel nauseous. And there are very simple techniques to make sure that, irrespective of the awesome digital virtual models that we have with all the BIM content, and we want people to interact with it very nicely, it's important that human comfort is placed as a key consideration. How people are placing objects, how people are acting with their interaction, their body response, and comfort levels must be well tested when implementing all of this. You don't want people to lean into your interactions and find it very difficult to interact with objects or have body pains and things like that. So as we have for standing interactions, we have for sitting interactions, and there are zones that you can explore to make all of these very easy on the user. And one thing that is also important is that you have to test. You have to test and test and test before you deploy. when you're testing, when you're doing a lot of game testing, it is important to find out where the strengths are, where users are finding it difficult. So for example, so myself and my team, we developed a VR experience for exploration of planetary objects like Mars. So we designed a VR experience for Mars, and it was really really interesting that the designers like us, we were so engrossed in the design that we got carried away with how people would feel in Mars. So for example, there's less gravity and things like that on the moon, and we forgot to code and implement all of this. When we got our first tester, who was a lady, the first thing she said was like, I can't feel my feet. Like, where are my legs? Where am I? I feel like I'm floating, or I feel like, uh, can you make this, move a little bit less, a little bit slower? Is that, I think this is jumping at me too fast. But as designers, we were so comfortable with what we were designing that it was so easy for us to say, oh yes, we've done a very fantastic work. So the importance of game testing is that you have to let other people test the interaction you're developing with your building information model in virtual reality. So how do we get started? Let's talk about getting started with game design. There is a use case that I'm going to show to you guys today. So there's a popular saying about never do a live demo, because things can go wrong. But I think I can risk doing a live demo, and I still have a video as backup, just in case things don't go as planned. So developing a case study, we use the Farnsworth house, which was a root project file, and the BIM version modeled the 3D, did the 3D model in Revit, added the building components, which are backed or some other repository. We won't go into that today. We also had a Rhino version that contains abstraction of design concepts. So people want to learn about circulation, people want to learn about structure, people want to learn about circulation to use, people want to learn about natural lighting, how your model, model are indicating that there's natural lighting in the building. So we did quite some level of abstraction in Rhino software, and we actually combined all of these in a VR version, and just made interactive features to be explored in a virtual world. So the use case is usually between, let's say, in a design scenario, between an architect and another architect, between an architect or consultant and the client or stakeholder, and also between professors and students. So these are like typical use cases that these can be adopted for. And the step-by-step scenarios that we developed for this engagement was, so for example, for a design outcome scenario, we made such that people can start to ask questions. Oh, can the sink location be different? Can they like interact with this object with their hands and feel tactile feedback? Can specifications be different? Are these products available? These are case scenarios for engagement in VR game for design outcome. And in educational outcome, can people identify things like the circulation spaces in the building? Can your students or can the professor be able to explain how structural design concepts are working in that building? And so for beginners, the introductory software would be starting with Revit, making clean models in Revit. You can use Rhino as backup, depending on what your skill level is. And Unity, so there is a major competitor for Unity, which is Unreal Engine. And the difference I would tell people between Unity and Unreal Engine is Unity focuses more on interaction, scripting, and actions. Unreal Engine focuses more on realism. So you typically can choose what software you want to integrate with, your Revit model or your Rhino model. But I mean, my recommendation based on my experience is that Unity might give you an easier industry entry knowledge, much more than Unreal, because Unreal focuses much more on visualization and visual clarity and realism, much more than Unity. So if you're looking for realism, you can use Unreal Engine. But if you're looking for, real solid game development, you want to use Unity. And also Steam VR. Steam VR is a plugin developed by Steam, which is a gaming provider company. And Steam is going to help you to do a lot of, scripting that ideally you would spend months or weeks trying to develop. So these are like, really good tips, and will help you get into the industry really quick. So let's quickly. So I think after here we're going to be going into some of the demos. So let's quickly look at how we're going to get there. So your game design basically will feature mostly two major build stages, and the first build stage would be uh, integrating your files from your Revit, integrating your files from Revit, integrating your files from Rhino, and making sure that you have everything well done and very clean and simple and straightforward. And also starting to go on with your texture, with your lighting, because lighting is responsible for like maybe like 60% of realism. Lighting provides your users with the feeling of presence, a whole lot, and texturing also like provides the rest of it. And now mechanics is very important in the sense that how do people interact with your model. The question about how, about are they going to be picking up objects? Are they going to be pushing and pulling objects? Are they going to be creating objects on their own? Are they going to be breaking things apart? Are they going to be putting things together? Are they going to be moving and turning off their gizmos and things like that? These are things that you need to like really figure out in the first stage. So your building information model file is ready. Your Revit file is detailed. You're happy with it, but then how do you integrate it into the game engine? So this is the first part of your build. The moment you're able to figure all of that out, you move to the next level in your build two, which is where you start to design the game level. So what do you want people to interact with first? Are there instructions about how to go around things? Because if you don't give instructions, people are going to try to figure things out. And if they are unable to do all of that, they want to stop playing the game. So are there processes to getting from one state to another? Are they going to be interacting with objects? Do they throw things apart? Do they pull it together? And also their navigation. How do they move around? Are they going to be walking in place? Are they going to be jumping? Are they going to have teleport options where they just disappear and appear in another scene? Do they move objects to touch their face in order to change location or something like that? This is going to be your next focus in the second stage of building BIM and VR game experience. So these are basic foundation concepts, and I mean, if you go with these, if you're starting or you're experiencing or you're developing anything around your BIM model and a game session, you must put this at the back of your mind, because this is going to be very, very helpful in helping you to get a leg up. So your root file, basically, irrespective of the level of detail that you have or level of development that you have, you can create a gaming experience. So even if you're in the concept stage of your design and you're still talking to your clients, you want them to have an overall feel of what the building looks like, with respect to the environment in which it's going to be built. You can develop a game experience. So it doesn't have to be a super detailed Revit model, and it could also be like a very simple Revit model. I'll give you an example in one of the next slides, where we did a sample with a Lego. Lego is like, the basic geometry that people can, typically interact with. And so the best practices for this development would be, making sure that your file integration is on point. your visual fidelity, like your lighting and texturing, is really good. Your interaction and mechanics are really okay, and your players are able to navigate pretty easily in the model. So let's look at the workflow for developing BIM and VR content. So the current methods typically is that people are looking at 2D drawings. People are looking at plans and sections and elevations. So we developed all of this just to provide a case use. We developed drawings, we created Rhino models, we created a physical study model, and then we got precedent photographs from the internet, of course. Well, I've not been to the Farnsworth House yet, even though I hope to be there someday, but not yet. So we created all of these just to create the case use on how people are currently interacting with drawings and models and designs. And then we took this further by asking questions about if architectural companies are going to test their employee knowledge and their capability to create concept design in preliminary stages. Are they going to ask them to jump into Revit files and start designing just like that? Would it be easier if they ask them to step into a VR session and make objects, make buildings, make designs, make virtual models, and let's see how well you can think, let's see how well you can design, let's see your level of understanding of abstract concepts in architecture and things like that. So so the other pieces that we created were a physical Lego version, just to explain the roots, the most basic level of development in architecture. Like if you're going to develop a detailed Revit model, which I'm going to show you in like 2 slides away, can you start at first to develop a Lego version of what you're designing? Let's even see how well you understand design concepts. And you do not only have to do this in the physical model section, you can actually do this in VR. And so created all these assets and components. And for the other use case for abstraction, created a Rhino version where different level of abstractions were actually in the same model. So there is all this information in the same model, but you can make your user start to interact with them in VR, in Unity. Unlike in Rhino, the best you can do in Rhino is maybe like turn off layers or group objects, and that is actually not giving the best possible experience. But in VR, you can actually people can explore on their own and interact with all of these features and components without having to go through really tough learning processes. So these use cases are identified to improve learning experience. And so here is the design use case for Revit. So the model on the left is a Revit model, and it's so detailed, up to the point where even the steel section beams have the manufacturer details, the areas, the sizes, and things like that. And the good thing about developing a very detailed BIM model is that when you take your model to Unity to develop a VR experience, you can as well take your data with you. You can as well take your information with you, which is going to be interactive. Your user is going to be able to interact with all of this data in the VR scene. So I'm going to share a real quick video. Let me see if I have my audio setting pretty set up. So give me 1 second. Let me configure this. Okay, so I think we should be good now. I'm gonna play this video. Start from here. So here is just a use case for navigation, locomotion, and also providing user interaction. So in such a way that people can interact with objects in the scene, so they can feel, they can touch, and they can feel that in the palms of their hand. So again, for mobile phone users in this webinar, you might experience some kind of lag, but I think for desktop users, it might just be okay. So the object interaction part, where people can get to pick up or grab models in hand, is very important for developing a good experience. So if you're taking your client through your BIM model and VR model, it's important to create a model in hand version of the same building. It will help them to understand beyond just going through the building actually, but seeing how the building works. And in education use case, you can get people to spawn objects, which could be different pieces of your BIM model. It could be doors or windows. You can start to get to put things together in VR, and you can actually use different methods of object spawning. You can use like cloning specific objects by making them interact with something else, so that you don't have a lot of objects like littering your scene. But one that we found out that was like most useful is the one where you have to push the button to interact with objects. It's more intuitive, and again, like I said, you can spawn different objects according to what you want. So now going further, people are going to start to ask, how do I get to learn? How do I get to learn all of these without subjecting, myself to tons and tons and lines of code that are like really confusing. So people who are, like a lot of architects are not very conversant with, things like this. And the thing about, VR and game design is that you have to code in some way. You have to code. And what I basically tell people is that if you must learn how to code, you can learn the basics of coding. But there is also another way of coding. There's also another way of learning how to code or create interaction, and that other way is learning visual scripting. It's much easier in the sense that visual scripting enables you to, for example, the code I just showed you now. This is the equivalent. This is the equivalent of that code. So I just wanted to show you guys. This is the equivalent of that code, and this is much more easier to learn than having to create scripts all by yourself. So again, the option between learning how to code is you either learn with the advanced C# coding language, which is Unity's primary language, or you learn the basics of C#, just the basics, and then you can go implementing things with visual scripting languages. And I've tested a couple of them, and both visual scripting is my favorite. So if anyone wants to go much detail into this, this is like the really advanced section of things. Just try to use both. It will make your work really easier. So here is the typical interface, where you can develop your BI model much more further, and you can also use a bold visual scripting on the side and troubleshoot your gaming environment at the same time without having to sweat through tons and tons of code. So here is another use case for developing learning content. So I'm just gonna quickly share that. So in this case, you're asking maybe like a student to assemble a virtual model based on their level of understanding of what they've been taught in their design education classes. And a very good way is to develop a kind of interaction system that enables them to place objects and snap objects in place. Especially for beginners, it might be very difficult for them to manipulate objects. So having their controllers in such a way that they can spawn, or they can grab objects really quickly. They can move and place objects much easily. Is one of the very good practices for developing this kind of content. So and also being able to navigate in that same space without so much mental stress or mental load of figuring out, oh, how do I move around, or how do I move these objects and also move myself. Is one of the great practices is that you have to like develop these two hand in hand, such that you don't break the interaction experience. So they feel much more present in the space. They are conducting their tasks. They are interacting with the objects. So again, this is a education learning use case, and the previous one was for like an architect and designer use case. Being able to also move around is like very key in interacting with the object. So making it very flexible and fluid and easy to use. So the major objective when you're like designing games for either for your client, or for educational purposes, or for other consultants to interact or experience your building design, is the major outcome you're looking for is like people being able to like create designs, or experience your design, or learn about the design. And one major factor about all of this is interaction, navigation, and the user interface. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a future workshop session where I can still share much more tips about visualizing or importing your data and getting the best out of that, and also the best tools that you can use for developing your user interface design to make it even way easier and give you an edge give you a competitive edge. So for example, companies are adopting VR now, and the companies that are getting the edge are the people that are doing it right. So it's not just about people jumping on the bandwagon to say, oh yeah, I think I want to develop my building information model in VR. But actually the question is, are you doing it right? And doing it right is actually something that can actually give you like a way extra edge, way extra competitive edge over other companies or other competitors. So I think this brings us to the end of this presentation. I think I got hit on 44 minutes. Yeah, my aim was to stop at 45 minutes. So credits to a couple of people that work with me: Rodrigo, Ima, Gabriela, Lester, Sanderford, and Eric. They were guys who were in my design studio and created some of the content you've seen, and myself created most of the video, scripting, the screenshots, the Lego models, and other things you've seen in the presentation. So I think we can now open up for questions.
Yes, thank you very much for that very interesting session. Uh, yes, I think we can now open up for questions. If we have questions, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, hi,
Hello, good afternoon.
hi, Tolu.
Yeah, hello.
Is Tolu trying to say something, or should I speak?
No,
Should I
carry
go
on,
on?
carry on.
Oh,
Go on,
okay.
please.
Architect Hassan, thank you very much for the presentation. I was going to ask, what ways do you use for your clients to actually get for you to actually get a feel of what your client is seeing? I'm going to cite a scenario. Let's say you have a presentation for your clients, and let's say maybe it's using an Oculus Quest, and he's trying to get a feel of what you've designed. How do you get to also understand or walk him or her through the process, so that for you to see what he's seeing, so that both of you can actually understand and interact better? Because those are one of
Yeah,
those ways that I've not really gotten a hang of.
hang of. So there are currently developments ongoing. One specific example is like using all space VR that can improve like real-time collaboration in the same environment. And also Unity and Revit are using Reflect, which so using Unity Reflect can help you to develop this content and host it on the cloud such that you can have real-time collaboration. At the same time, you're seeing the same thing and you're talking about the same thing. So these are like much more different tools rather than the basic. And like you rightly said, it's important that you are actually communicating about the same things, because that can also like break the experience if your client is seeing something else and you're talking about something else. So that's for in the case where you're not physically present in the same place. But if you're physically present in the same place, I mean, that is so easy because you practically will be seeing the same things. So not being physically present in the same space, exploring what Unity Reflect has to offer, because it can be integrated right from your Revit model. And that's something I'm still exploring, and also still exploring Altspace VR. So these two, I think, are making very good uh, progress towards solving all of that. There's also like the VR, web VR option, where you can deploy on the web, and your clients can actually interact with either, whether they have the device or not, they can still experience what you're building for them, because not everyone is going to be able to either buy any of these devices or even set it up effectively. So web VR is one option that a lot of people should explore when developing, when deploying content for their client.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think
You're
that's good.
welcome. So yeah, I was going to activate my video. Okay, Jinad has a question. Jinad is raising his hand.
Yeah, good
Can you
afternoon.
unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, done already.
Yeah, good
Can you?
afternoon, Jinad.
Yeah. You said
Yeah, we
something
can hear you
about
clearly.
okay. You said something about visual scripting. The visual scripting, is it like to is it something as like can you learn it through Visual Studio software, like the normal coding, or there's a different software for it? Like, can you explain further on that? I'm trying to get the
Okay,
hang of it.
so both visual scripting is actually like plugin for Unity. So it's a different software, but you cannot use Visual Studio to learn visual scripting, because Visual Studio is like just code. Visual Studio
Okay.
is just code. Yeah. So, but
So
visual scripting you can embed it inside of Unity.
okay, so you have to download both Visual Scripting to learn Visual Scripting.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There's a
All
both
right.
visual scripting on the Unity Asset Store.
Oh, all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So let me see.
So
There's
I
a
guess with
typical
no
interface of what
further
visual
questions, or do
scripting
we
looks
still
like.
have other questions?
So in the comments, McCarthy said his preference is the Oculus. Yeah. So just like I said where we talked about, the preferred controller, and I said something about, people usually have, preferences depending on, maybe what you're exposed to or what you're used to. And just like in computer gaming, people have preferences for keyboard and mouse, or people have preferences for, console controllers. So, yeah, I mean, preferences usually, set in, but mine is the HTC Vive controller, just because it makes it provides easier learning experience for beginners in VR, and especially if you're deploying for your client who is like who has not had experience with gaming, who doesn't know how to play games with a controller. The HTC Vive controller is possibly their best option.
Good afternoon.
Yes, hi, good afternoon.
Okay. Great presentation, I must say. My
Thanks, Tolu.
question is the Unity presentation, the demo video you did. Is there a way we could
Yes.
integrate the photorealism of materials into the model so they can have a better feel of the space with all the materials and textures within?
Oh yes, that's very possible. So the only reason why that the textures were not baked into this particular video was it was just a use case. There's a much more detailed model that has like the textures, the colors, the wardrobes, the flooring, and things like that. But this was just like a very quick demo just to get this knowledge across. So yes, you can incorporate all of your textures and bake it into the scene. Also, something you have to be mindful about is performance. So if you're going to load up all your computer with a lot of textures and graphics and baking time, you have to be mindful of how strong your computer is. And when you're deploying it for your client, you have to develop it such a way that it creates a smooth running experience. So irrespective of the computers they have, they can still considerably run the game without having performance issues. So yes, it's very possible to bake all the lighting, the texture into the game experience. Yeah.
Without require much more coding.
And you can. Well, texturing is not coding. The only time you will have to code for textures is if you want to develop actions for swapping textures, like like okay, I'm looking at this wardrobe, for example. I want to have it in a different kind of texture. Then you have to code. Then you have to code to tell the computer to create these actions based on doing. So if the user is touching the wardrobe, do you want it to switch between lacquer? Do you want it to switch between mahogany texture? Do you want it to switch between beach texture and things like that? So that would be coding. But if you want to like have just one kind of texture on your objects or your geometry, absolutely no level required to do that.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think we still have about a few more minutes to go.
Hi, Architect Hassan. Good afternoon.
Hi, Ibukun.
Yep. All right. Quick one. I actually came to the class late, so I just need to ask a little question. So when working with Revit and also working hand in hand with Unity, do you actually need the exporting process? Does it require like a plugin or something? Because I know like using, for instance, using SketchUp to Unreal Engine, you need like a data smith to link both files together. So when it comes to the Unity and Revit, is there a particular synchronization method that's required for it?
Okay, so for a start, developing game content for Revit files does not require you to have a specific plugin for exporting from Revit. The simple FBX is able to do all of that. The simple FBX file format, if you export to FBX file format, you're able to do, all the things you want to do. But now, if you want to export all the information, you need to use PIXYZ to get all that imported into Unity. If you want to do real-time synchronization between Unity and Revit, then you need Unity Reflect to do that. And I mean, these are paid plugins. Unity Reflect just has, I think, 14 days trial, so you can try that out. But after that, you have to pay, I think, maybe $600 per year. I can't remember the exact price now to get a pro, to get the pro version of Unity Reflect. Yeah, but off the bat, you can just use the normal FBX export option, and you should be fine.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. You're welcome. Okay, I think Jinat still raises his hand.
Yeah, just wanted to add to what just said. Like I once heard that you can make use of 3ds Max, like you import your file from Revit to 3ds Max, do some editing, then before you move it to this thing, before you move it to Unity, that's all your texture and everything still comes in good like that. Or you said something about P something now. I didn't get that.
PIXYZ.
Yeah, is that
PIXYZ. I just put
is
that
that a
in the group
plugin?
chat now. PIXYZ.
Okay, is that a plugin?
Yeah,
Is it also
PIXYZ is a plugin. Yeah.
okay? Is it also a paid one? Is it also a paid version?
Yeah, PIXYZ is a paid version, but it's cheap. It's cheap. PIXYZ
Okay.
is like really cheap, like maybe $10, $15 or something. Yeah.
Oh,
It's really cheap. It's really, really cheap. Let me see. I'm gonna have to. No. So if you go to the Unity Asset Store, you can get the PIXYZ version in a one-time download. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so with no other question, we would like to end this session. I think that yes, people are just saying thank you. So thank you very much for attending this session today. We also want to appreciate the speaker, Hassan, he's actually joining us at a very early period because of his time zone. So really appreciate you. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to more and more engagement with you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for coming. You can, for those people who would like to access the recording, it will be accessible through the membership portal. And we hope to do more of this. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you guys and have a good one. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.